So 3.4, we're going to talk about rational zeros of polynomials. So we have the rational zero theorem. You'll hear me call it P over Q a lot, or last over first. The rational zeros theorem helps us find the zeros of a polynomial that doesn't factor. So we use factors of the last over factors of the first, meaning factors of our constant over factors of our leading coefficient. Now here, leading coefficient in college algebra, our leading coefficient's always going to be 1, so these numbers won't be fractions that you'll have to do synthetic division with, so they'll be nice whole numbers. So our leading coefficient will always be 1, so we'll always get 1 on the bottom. Now, on the test and quiz, well, on the quiz, because this will be on the quiz, and on WebAssign, it'll have you leave your answers. It'll ask for zeros and in factored form. So as an example, let's say I had something like x squared plus 7x plus 10. And I was asked to find the zeros. What would I do here? Factor. What are two factors of 10 that add to 7? 5 and 2. So this would be x plus 5 and x plus 2. And then what would x equal? -5 and -2. So on the WebAssign, when it asks for factored form, you're going to put the factors of it. So that would be the x plus 5 and the x plus 2. This is factored form. And then when it asks for the zeros, that's just the answers, the solutions. All right, example 1. So we're using the rational zeros theorem. So we use factors of our last over factors of the first. So P over Q. What are factors of 2? What two numbers multiply and give us 2? 1 and 2, or 2 and 1. And then what are factors of our first, our leading coefficient, factors of 1? 1. Always for these numbers, we're going to do plus or minus, so the positive and negative of these numbers. So these are possible options, are possible factors. These aren't our actual answers. To find our actual answers, we need to do synthetic division. And when we get 0 as our remainder, that means that it would be a factor of our polynomial. So we want to use synthetic division and test to see if we get 0 or not. If we don't get 0, it's not a factor. We have to try another number. So our possible options here are positive and -1 and positive and -2. Which numbers are going to go inside the box? Inside. Where does the 0 go? After the 1. 1, 0, -3, 2. Remember, just like before when we were doing synthetic division, all of your terms have to be represented. We're missing an x squared, so I need to put a 0 for the x squared spot. So we have 1, 0, -3, 2. Now outside, we can try positive 1, -1, positive 2, or -2. I would suggest sticking with 1 first, the smaller numbers first, just because it's going to be easier math. So what do you want to try first on the outside? Sure, let's try 1. So we're going to drop down the 1, multiply, add on the inside, we get 1, multiply 1, add, -2, multiply -2, add, we get 0. So is 1 a factor? Yes. So x is equal to 1. That is one of our answers. How many answers total are we going to have here? 3, because our highest degree is 3, so that tells us we're going to have 3 answers total. Now, if we started with x to the 3rd power and we did synthetic division, what is the result, the answer here? What's this going to start with? X squared. It starts with 1 less. So we have x squared plus x minus 2. You can do the P over Q again here if you wanted to, or if it's an x squared, you could just factor it. So let's see if x squared plus x minus 2 factors. What are 2 factors of negative 2? That add to 1. 2 and negative 1. So this would be x plus 2 and x minus 1. So what does x equal? Negative 2 and 1. So x is equal to 1, 1, we have 2 of them, and negative 2. So these would be our zeros. And then in factored form, how would I write this?
X equals, no, x plus 1, x minus 1.
X minus 1, but how many of those do I have?
2.
2, so x minus 1 squared, because I have 2 of them. And then what else? X plus 2.
Oh, you do the opposite?
Yes. Remember, when you factor it here, you'd set them equal to 0, so the signs end up flipping. So it's the opposite sign from factored form in your zeros. The next page just talks about the steps when using the rational zeros theorem. So finding the rational zeros of a polynomial, you want to list all your possible zeros, so that's p over q. Then you divide, so that's our synthetic division. If when you divide, what you tried, if you don't get 0 as your remainder, then you have to try a different number. So if you did synthetic division, 0 is not your remainder, then that's not a factor, you have to try again. So it's when it says repeat, it says just do the steps again if it's not a factor. So let's start with number 1 on the next page. So p over q, factors of our last over factors of the first. What are factors of 8? 1, 2, 4, and 8. They don't have to be in order, but sometimes when you're plugging it in, it's easier to just plug in the smaller ones first if you want to put it in order. Just make sure you keep track of what you're plugging in so you don't plug in the same number multiple times and waste time. What are factors of 1? 1. And then this is always the positive and negatives of these numbers, so plus or minus. All right, so we're doing synthetic division. What's going to go inside the box? 1, 1, negative 6, negative 4, and 8. What do you want to try first? Sure, we can try 1. So I'm going to drop down the 1, multiply, add, we get 2, multiply, would be 2, add, negative 4, multiply, negative 4, add, negative 8, multiply, negative 8, add, we get 0. Does 1 work? Yes, so x is equal to 1 is one of our answers. Now I started with x to the 4th power, so how many answers am I going to have? 4 answers. So here, this would be x to the 3rd power. Since we have 4 terms, you could write it out, try to factor by grouping. If that doesn't work, do p over q again. So let's do p over q again. So we have 1, 2, negative 4, and negative 8. That goes inside the box now. So I'm using the coefficients of the answer that I just got. Are the p over q are possible options? Are those going to change? No. Our last is still 8, so it doesn't change. So we still have the same possible options. What do you want to try next? Any suggestions? Sure, we can try negative 1. So we drop down the 1, multiply, we get negative 1, add 1, multiply, negative 1, add negative 5, multiply, positive 5, add negative 3. Does negative 1 work? No. So that is not an answer. So you can cross it off your list of possible options so you don't try it again. Let's try something else. Sure, let's try 2. Multiply, add, multiply, we get 8, add 4, multiply, 8, add. Does 2 work? Yeah. Yes, so x is also equal to 2. Yeah, so I'm going to add that to my list. From here, this will be an x squared plus 4x plus 4. So I can try to factor this. X squared plus 4x plus 4. Do we have two factors of 4 that add to 4? What are they? 2 and 2. So x plus 2 and x plus 2. So what does x equal? -2 and -2. So our zeros are 1, 2, -2, and -2. And then in factored form, how would we write this? X minus 1, x minus 2, and x plus 2 squared. Awesome. All right, let's do number 2. So again, we're going to use our P over Q. What are factors of 24?
1, 8, 3, 6 and 4.
Anything else?
12 and 2.
12 and 2. Anything else? 24. I think that's all of them. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 12, and 24. Over factors of our first, which are just 1. So we're going to use our synthetic division here. What's going to go in the box? Awesome. 1, 5, -2, and -24. We're not missing anything here, so we can just put those in the box. What do you want to try first? Any suggestions? Sure, let's try 1. So we're going to drop down 1, multiply, add, we get 6. Multiply 6, add would be 4. Multiply 4, add -20. Does 1 work? No. So we got to try something else. As soon as you realize it's not going to work, like if you got halfway through synthetic division, you know it's not going to end up being 0, you can just erase it and try it as something else. You don't have to go all the way through once you realize. 2. All right, multiply, we get 2, add 7, multiply 14, add 12, multiply 24, add, we get 0. So does 2 work?
Yeah.
Yes, so x is equal to 2 is going to be one of our answers. Our question started with x to the 3rd power, so our answer here is going to be x squared plus 7x plus 12. From here, we could just factor it. You can do P over Q again if you want, or you can just factor. Bless you. Do we have two factors of 12 that add to 7? 3 and 4. So x plus 3 and x plus 4. So what does x equal? -3 and -4. Perfect. So our answers are 2, -3, and -4. So how would I write this in factored form? What would go first? X minus 2, x plus 3, and x plus 4.
Do you have to do in that order?
No, it doesn't have to be in order. I just didn't know which one you guys were saying. What if this didn't factor here? If we got x squared plus 7x plus 12, something that didn't factor, how else could we solve? If we did P over Q, let's say we did P over Q, nothing worked, it doesn't factor, how else could we solve? Quadratic. So you could do your quadratic formula. I don't know if any on the web assign end up being quadratic. I think that they all work out to whole numbers, but just keep that in mind that if it doesn't factor, quadratic formula would also give you an answer. All right, let's do number 3, last one. What are factors of 60? So 2 and 6. Anything else? 10. 30. 5 and 12. 1 and 60. Anything else? 3 and 20. Anything else? 4 and 15. I think that's all of them.
What? Oh my god, there's so many.
How many answers are we going to have? 3 of them. So only 3 out of these possible, however many we have here, are going to actually be answers. So let's test. What's going to go inside the box? 1, -12, 47, and -60. A period got it on their first try.
So we just have to pick, like, at random?
Pick one. So let's try 3. +3 or -3?
No, let's do 2. Let's do 2.
Okay.
Make up your mind.
Let's try 2.
It's locked in 2.
It doesn't work. All right, Tabit, what else? 2 doesn't work. Sure, let's try 3.
4. Can you trust me on this?
No.
All right. It's
They
not
seem pretty confident in 3. We could try 4 next if 3 doesn't work. So multiply 3, add, we get -9. Multiply, this will be -27. Add, we get 20. Multiply, 60, add, 0. Does 3 work? Yes. X is equal to 3. Perfect. From here, this would be x squared minus 9x plus 20. So let's see if we can factor it. What are 2 factors of 20 that add to -9? -5 and -4. So x minus 5 and x minus 4. So what does x equal? 5 and 4. So what are 2 other answers that we could have tried from the start that would have worked? What are 2 other answers? We tried 3 and did synthetic division and it worked. What are 2 other answers that would have also worked? 4 and 5. So Tabit, you would have been right too. 4 and 5 both would have worked. But if you try any of these 3 answers at the start, let's say we would have done 5 first. When it factored, we would have gotten 3 and 4 as answers. Lastly, let's write it in factored form. Tabit, how would we write it in factored form?
-3, 4, and 5.
X minus 3.
X minus 4 and X minus 5.
X minus 4 and x minus 5. Bless you.